Hey guys, what's up? Sando here, and today I'll be testing a complementary headphone amplifier for the Soncoz QXA1 DAC. So it uses 4 op-amps at its input stage, 4 op-amps at its output stage, and it's called Soncoz QXA1, which I'll be calling the little one for obvious reasons. That name is just too difficult to pronounce. It goes for $270 and there are plenty of things to cover, so let's check it out. First of all, it's a fully CNC machined unit from a single block of aluminum. There aren't visible screws on its sides, except for the rear panel. It's incredibly small and elegant looking to me. The surface area is exactly the size of a modern smartphone. It's slightly smaller than my palm, meaning that you can squeeze it in tiny workspaces. Soncoz put ventilation holes under the unit and on its side panels so that hot air would move away, prolonging the life of its electronics. The only thing I dislike are those short rubber feet which aren't lifting it much from the ground. One of its coolest features is that monochrome screen that will be showing the selected input, output, gain position and volume level, and all that can be controlled via its volume wheel. It uses a clever user interface and I didn't even need its manual to fully understand it. As for controls, there is just a volume knob to its right, a sheet of glass near it houses a monochrome screen, and to its left, 2 headphone jacks can be found coming in 4-pin XLR and 1/4-inch flavors. On its back you'll find a pair of XLR and RCA inputs, a pair of RCA preamp outputs, and a USB Type-C input that will be powering on the unit. A word of advice first, you'll need an adapter that can provide at least 1.5 amperes of current, otherwise it will not power on the unit. As for tech inside it, we're dealing here with an amp that uses 4 OPA1642 and 4 OPA1622 op-amps as voltage and current buffers that are ensuring its basic operation. As for the OPAs themselves, these are regarded as quite warm, smooth and natural sounding, exactly what its complementary DAC really needs. It offers 1.5 watts in 32 ohms and about half that power in 300 ohms, suggesting that it can drive both low and high impedance headphones without too much trouble. Output impedance is impressively low at just 0.1 ohm. It should fully preserve the damping factor for a nice transient response. The last thing to know is that it uses a digital volume pot combined with several analog relays for a perfect channel matching even at the lowest volumes. Okay guys, this is pretty much it, so let's hit some eardrums. Since I'm describing an entry-level headphone amplifier from Soncoz, I'll go lighter on it and of course I'll use less audiophile terms so you can better understand me. So first of all, it's one of the few headphone amplifiers that provides 1.5 watts per channel from such a small footprint, and it's really one of its strongest selling points. When you stack it on top of its matching DAC, you are getting a really cute, really small stack, as you can see. It's fully balanced input to output that can easily drive most of your headphones, if not really hold your headphones without too much trouble. Secondly, it provides just a clean power to your headphones, so its noise floor is really nowhere to be spotted. And I just told you about 90% of what you should know about the little one. Soncoz didn't tune it the way Topping and SMSL tunes their devices. There aren't really noise shaping techniques at play in here, meaning that the little one sounded by a hair more natural and more organic sounding. And before you start raising those pitchforks, those torches that I'm describing an op-amp based headphone amplifier, you should know that the best measuring headphone amplifiers of right now are still using op-amps. What a big surprise. So be it Benchmark HPA4, Topping A90 or SMSL SP400, all of them are using op-amps and those are still pretty much the kings in terms of signal to noise ratio and low distortion. Of course, this one is not exactly as squeaky clean and it didn't offer the blackest background. but I still found it pretty clean and detailed sounding. Moving on to noise floor, I need to mention about two things. So first of all, it uses several voltage regulators at its USB Type-C input, so all that incoming DC voltage is already filtered. And secondly, it uses a really high performance Muses digital volume pot, followed by several analog relays that are adjusting its left and right channel for a perfect channel balance. And sincerely, I wasn't expecting seeing analog relays in such a tiny unit, but after seeing 4 microvolts of noise on its 4-pin XLR and 2 microvolts of noise on its single-ended output, I knew that I'm dealing with a very clean amplifier. And after connecting my most sensitive IEMs that I have at my disposal, those are FiO FI9, I went almost full power, I went maximum gain, and I couldn't spot really nothing. So this is a very IEM friendly amplifier. You can use your entire headphone collection, IEM collection. You can use maximum gain and you'll have plenty of volume to play with. So this is really an amazing sounding amplifier for IEMs. This was really unexpected because I was powering it with an USB port of my PC, but I've got similar results with an external smartphone charger. Moving on to its power output, 1.5 watts in 32 ohms and about half that number in 300 ohms are some respectable numbers. And while it cannot awake some world-class dynamics or just drive the heaviest loads out there, it was still quite amazing with most of my headphones. So Hi-Fi Sundara HE400 SE worked really great, so there was plenty of volume remaining on tap. Kineton Rognir, RZH Phobos just spread their wings and sounded if I put them on bigger amplifiers. So it nicely controlled their drivers, just it never felt out of breath with such headphones. With dynamic driver headphones, it worked equally impressive and I cannot complain about its power output. There was just one headphone that refused to hit the dance floor, and that was the Hi-Fi Susvara and to a lesser degree the Odyssey LCD4. There wasn't enough headroom with Susvara at all, and about 50 dB remaining on tap with the LCD4, so this is still a great sounding amplifier with planars. Surprisingly, it delivered more power compared to AUN X1S GT, and the little Soncoz worked better with all my planar headphones. Moving on to transients, or how fast it can sound and how hard it can pound, it will easily accelerate and decelerate those transients no matter the track that is being played, but it will not pound and smash like putting Hulk on a drum kit. So its limited power output and those mid-fight transients are some of the few cons that I see with the little Soncoz amp. So it was a fast puncher, that is for sure, but it's playing in the lightweight category, so don't expect world-class uppercuts, because for that you'll need just more power, more brute force in general. However, it needs to be said that only with Odyssey LCD4 and with the Hi-Fi Susvara I felt a lesser kick and impact, and with everything else it performed like a natural pugilist, keeping up with the most demanding tracks as Electronica for example. With all that said, I still find it quite fun and speedy, but not as fearsome and impactful as the best amplifiers that I know. Besides its limited power output and that weaker bass slam that I've experienced with high-end planar magnetic headphones, its left to right soundstage did also take a small hit. And I've already experienced a dozen of headphone amplifiers, and I can say that output power directly influences the sheer scale of the music. And the same happens with stereo setups, because in my case a powerful dual mono configuration just provided a much bigger scale, so a much wider stage, a much deeper sound in a way. Our little Soncoz amp is a little shy when it comes to power output, so of course I was not surrounded with music. However, with live and reference recordings, it was pushing all that wizardry outside my head, so it was still adding a little bit of air in between the notes, but it was not doing that so impressive as some higher priced amplifiers. So it will not artificially boost the soundstage size as it happens with tube-based amplifiers, and it will render all that as close as possible to the original intent of the mastering engineer. In terms of detail retrieval and transparency, that super low noise floor is helping a lot in delivering those details, tiny details to the surface. So in my view, this is a clean sounding amplifier, but not a squeaky clean amplifier like those of Topping and SMSL. The tiny Soncoz amp is just putting a mild accent on those details, so just always wanting to deliver a higher transparency. And while it won't challenge really the best measuring headphone amplifiers out there, it will still sound resolving and as close to the source material. Put it on a highly detailed DAC and immediately some low intensity notes would be appearing in the most unusual places. And while it didn't really sound super sharp, there wasn't a moment when I felt that something is gravely missing from my music. Another interesting aspect is that while being detailed, it never forced me looking at those details. Snare drum hits and cymbal crashes just stood out with their natural metallic bodies without adding unnatural ringing and shrillness that several amplifiers are putting on a plate. Moving on to frequency response, there is a very good extension in the bass. It felt controlled, it decayed naturally, so not too soon, not too late, just spot on. It was always on time, it was precise, it was a fast type of bass, it was just noise-free, and it was never interplaying with the mid-range section. Its mid-bass felt quite defined, there was a sense of fullness, so it had a higher density. But I presume that for a nicer transit response and bass slam, a higher capacitance and a better power supply will be needed, and maybe their upcoming LP1 regulated power supply would add a nicer impact in the bass. One of its biggest highlights is that it never sounded dry in the mid-range. So my folk and blues collection sounded as if I was listening to an all discrete amplifier, if that makes any sense to you. So Soncoz, it seems that added just a pinch of naturalness, a pinch of warmth, so pushing all that mid-range a little bit forward towards me. So overall, I wouldn't describe it as overly warm or overly natural sounding. It was more about being honest while preserving the weight and the naturalness of the mid-range, and going slightly higher on its volume pot didn't make it aggressive, as it was still cruising around, adding smoothness and a sense of calm. While its treble was a little bit highlighted, it never felt bright or harsh sounding to me with its matching DAC right here. So it went sky high, it was easily reaching those 15 kHz notes, especially with the Hyphen Mansudara on my head, but it was never teeth clenching or bothering to me. My usual rock and metal tunes didn't pose the slightest problem, even with the Hyphemans on my head, and the usual grain and over-sharpness of several THX AAA amplifiers was just forever gone, never to be spotted on the little Soncoz. It tamed that treble while preserving a detailed and a clean performance. As for my conclusions, I can nitpick a little about its limited depth and soundstage size, about its weaker bass slam, and this is where all my complaints would see a full stop. This is really the smallest, fully balanced headphone amplifier that I tried, yet it drove most of my headphones without sweating. It was simply dead silent with IEMs, and its slight warmish tint makes it a perfect match with a wide variety of headphones. And if you already own a Soncoz QXA1 DAC, then its matching amp should fit the bill nicely. All things considered, its asking price was fully justified, and it receives my stamp of approval. Okay folks, I hope you enjoyed my review. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and as usual, listen to my music, be positive, I'll see you around.